Morning, everybody. I hope first and foremost y'all had a good holiday. It's 27th, I believe, so 2 days after the big Christmas festivity. And we had quite a to-do going on here. I had all three of my brothers and all their families, plus my mom, my wife's mom. We had a pretty full house. We have a big building, accommodated them just fine. And of course, my wife added an 11-foot snowman to the family for the week. And one of the benefits of having 12-foot ceilings is you can put an outdoor snowman in your record room. Thanks, wife. Appreciate that very much. We're going to call him Charlie for the day. So Christmas went by pretty uneventfully. It was nice to see my mom. She's having heart surgery in a few weeks, which is, of course, always concerning and kind of, you know, it weighs on you. But I think she's going to be okay going through it. It's going to be non-invasive, so it won't be open heart surgery, thankfully. She's fairly strong, but these things always have varying degrees to them. So say a prayer for my mom. It's just one more part of getting old. Those around you who are older start to have their issues. And I had a real episode Christmas Eve morning where I really missed my dad. A song came on the Christmas music radio, and it just made me think of him and how he worked so hard his whole life as an immigrant from Holland to Canada, raised 4 boys, became evangelical minister. Well, we went through some tough times as a family. We kind of bounced back. We had a fairly good family unit the last 30 years where we were all fairly on good terms with each other. But he never really got time to retire and relax. His health deteriorated quickly, and for the last couple of years, minus a leg in a wheelchair, several strokes, and he passed, of course, about 3.5 years ago. But it really hit me this time at Christmas time. You know, it's a double-edged sword to holidays. You can really have some strong memories, which music always can do, and really, really miss my father. So it makes you appreciate those who are still with you, you know. And I suppose recognizing them and just being thankful you had them is part of that process, but it doesn't make it easy. You know, it's tough, but it's part of the cycle of life. And you know, not to be coy about it, but you know, it's something we just all have to kind of find our day of reckoning and how we handle it. Mortality and the whole spiel. For me, the highlight of Christmas, believe it or not, was bonding with 3 of my nephews. 2 of my brother's, Tim's kids, one was like 17, one's like 14, maybe even younger, 16 and 13, and one of my brother Paul's kids, Caleb. I never really bonded with any of them. I'm the oldest of the 4 boys, my brothers. I don't have my own kids, I have 2 stepkids. I always was kind of the guy living in the city doing the DJ thing, while they were all in southern Minnesota being more family oriented and doing their careers and raising their families. And of course I got married, and my wife kind of having kids, stepkids, probably more into that same landscape. But I was always kind of distant to the nephews and nieces. Not for my wanting, but just they didn't really know me the same way. And I was just that guy from the city who was a DJ. And oddly enough, though, it was the DJ that kind of finally allowed me to connect with them. We've had a few events here over the years, and often it's just kind of just a blitz of activity. It's so crazy. You don't really get time to connect with people, with so many people here. Often there's a few neighbors and friends here as well, which all just makes your time to chat and get to know people very limited. We've done a few camping trips where, you know, you play little activities together, but there's never really been that time to get to know them the same way. And I left in my back DJ room some of the more current stuff I have, hip-hop, R&B, pop music. I left all those records sitting out. I just wanted the kids who came to see them, and I thought maybe it will pique one of their interests. You know, maybe one of them will be like, oh, you got Dua Lipa on vinyl, you got Pop Smoke on vinyl, you got Bruno Mars. You know, I thought maybe there would be that connection, and I was right. 2 of them saw all that stuff in the back, and they came up right to me like, oh, you have new music on vinyl as well. And they're fairly new to the vinyl thing, you know, and we ended up bonding for 2 hours talking about music. and that was a thrill for me. I didn't force it. I didn't sit there lecturing them. They just sucked it out of me like a sponge. And they kept bringing like Biggie Smalls and Jay-Z records and play this and talk about that and what's the relationship with this, and just really enthralled by the whole process of vinyl and the process of DJing, and the fact that I'm an old guy but I can still listen to something that's kind of more current that the kids know about, which is part of being a DJ. You have to kind of connect dots. You have to make compromises. You have to embrace people and where they're at, and then if you play enough things that they know and love, they'll kind of go, oh, this guy's on my level, and they'll be more accepting of the other things you play that they may not know. And so having current music is an essential part of being a good DJ, at least in terms of what I do. If you're a house DJ, you're in a different ballpark, But when you're doing kind of events like I do and have residencies at clubs, you have to have that broad spectrum. And so for me, it was just a real nice experience sitting here with Clayton and Luke and Caleb talking about music and the power of music and the connections with music, and it opened the door for me to be able to talk to them about jazz, because this room's all jazz records and the back room's all rock, R&B, and hip-hop. And so they were asking about the records in this room. I explained to them that it's jazz, and I got the chance to open up to them and talk to them about what an MC says into a microphone and what a soul singer was saying in the 60s and 70s into that microphone. Pre-civil rights, these guys were saying into their saxophones. And you could see their eyes light up. And you could see the connections happening in their brain and how it is all interwoven. And the blues and the jazz is the roots of so many things. And then my brother Tim comes down, who's the father of two of these kids. And he was like, play some Beatles, play some Stones, because he's a bit more older traditional in his viewpoints on music. He likes a lot of good music. He's a pretty broad palette. It just doesn't include anything from the last 15, 20 years. And his kids were like, Uncle Dan's cool, he likes this, he likes that. And it was just fun. And like I said, we went back up after an hour, back upstairs to the party, and had desserts. We also have this competition with all the different kids making a dessert and see who wins. And as soon as that was wrapped up, those three kids ran back down the stairs to go look at more records, to pull more records off the shelves. So I followed them back downstairs, and we talked for another 40 minutes till it was time for them all to go. And they left excited, and they left with a little list of things they wanted to download. And I introduced them to Rudimental, like British group I love. That's got, a couple black guys, a guy from like India and a white dude from Denmark or Sweden. And they just make this great, globally, socially conscious music with message and melody and exciting reggae and drum and bass roots to it that electrifies a dance club. And then Olivia came down, one of my other nieces, and she was dancing to it. And it's just nice, the power of music to communicate. And I connected with, like I said, 3 or 4 of my nieces and nephews that I never really had that opportunity to do before. I never got the chance to talk with my mom quite as much as I wanted, but we talk on the phone all the time. So, and for the most part, my mom and my brothers were thrilled that I was getting the chance to connect with their kids, which is, it's the power of music. It has a real ability to embrace and connect and to illustrate the past and make everything come to life. And I felt good about it. It was nice. When they left, I was like, it was really nice getting to know those kids a little bit and for them to get to know me and to see me in a different light. It was a blessing, For me, it was probably my greatest Christmas treat this year. Our family was pretty tight on money. We had to do a lot of Christmas gift exchanging. And, but my wife is a blessing. She's a gift. I love her dearly, and my family is one of those things that keeps you rock solid, I feel for those kids who never had a chance to really have that family experience. If those kids grow up in environments where they don't have that love, that setting, it really keeps your stone set. It's hard to be a diamond without a good setting, and that's at the base of a lot of who I am is family. In spite of some tough times we had as a family, holidays really brings that out. Holiday really helps you remind yourself the value of family and how much family shapes us, how much it determines our character. And even our essences and our belief in things like faith, hope, love, and trust. If we've never experienced love and trust firsthand via our parents and family, those institutions are the places that faith, hope, love, and trust are born and bred. They're not some kind of spiritual, religious, theological entities. These are family things. They're driven by your parents loving each other and being committed to each other. They're driven by the hope that someday I can have it as good as my parents have it. And if they don't have it good and they divorce and they split, or that you were, left, parents pass at a young age, whatever you have, it must be that much harder to generate faith, hope, love, and trust. And life without faith, hope, love, and trust is a much bleaker place. And so, bottom line, my message today is I'm just thankful for my family. Thankful for the relationships. And there's ups and downs. In every family there's ups and downs. But certainly it's a valuable, valuable commodity. And I appreciate it and value it more than words can express. And I like words. I enjoy words. So anyway, enough on Christmas. I hope you all had a great holiday. My brother gave me a stern warning on the trading cards. I got some concerns. If anybody out there is kind of a lawyer that deals with this kind of stuff, I'd appreciate you to PM me or just reach out via the messages below. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm just trying to share and spread the joy of jazz and the knowledge of it. And I want to give these cards away to people who want them. Is there going to be legal recourse? Am I going to be held accountable for this? And can I claim fair use? And I don't have a lawyer on retainer, obviously. And so maybe someone who's a follower of this channel has some legal advice for me. And I've had a few people reach out, but they usually have predicated that with saying I'm not a lawyer. So anybody who is a lawyer, what is my legal recourse and how can I go about doing it and not find a problem? So that's that. And we're making some good progress on the cards. I took a few days off, but I think we're up in the mid 80s now. Fronts and backs done. And again, I got the fronts done for almost 700. So the backs are taking a little more time, but we're making progress. But again, I've had a few kind of moments of like, are you sure you really want to do that for people? And I do want to do it, but I also don't want to. And what are the possible repercussions? If I'm not making money, they can't take money from me, can they? Not that I have much money for them to take. But anyway, that's the update on the cards for now. Fun record I want to talk to you about for a minute here is Stan Getz's West Coast Jazz. And it's not even really billed Stan Getz. It's just kind of a VERVE session of West Coast cool. And as I joked on Facebook the other day, this is as cool as it gets. It's got a great lineup. It seems like it's kind of co-led Stan Getz and Shelly Manne, which doesn't really give either one head billing. And the three below are also kind of in the same size font. Leroy Vinegar on the bass, Lou Levy on the piano, and the fantastic Conti Candoli is on the trumpet, and it says courtesy of Bethlehem, where Conti Candoli has a couple records being released in Bethlehem in the same era, 55, 56. And Conti Candoli is a fantastic trumpet player. And honestly, it's his playing on this record that seems to jump out at me and grab me by the throat the most. Getz is fine, and the rhythm section is great, but this is fantastic cool. And it's just got that softer tone than hard bop. It's cool bop. And I think cool and cool bop are two different things. I've kind of explained it at times. Cool is Brubeck Take 5. Some of that Chico Hamilton Pacific stuff. It's just really, it doesn't have the same tempos. Doesn't have the same intensity. Cool bop doesn't have the same emotional context as hard bop, but it shares the same tempos, the same aggressive style, the same really intense approach. But it just always seems to lack a certain emotional context. And it's cool bop's really hard bop by white players. It's kind of what it is. Not to say a white guy can't be angry and blow hard. Of course they can. but it's just not the same as the black hard bop coming out of New York that has the social ramifications and the history behind it and the civil rights movement going on. Hard bop is a manifestation of those changes happening. And so it would be hard for a white player to really capture that same kind of intensity and emotional connection via the music. But they can emulate the tempos, they can emulate the science of the music. It's the emotional context that's going to be somewhat different. And so cool bop always has a bit of a different tone to it. And it's softer. It's fast tempo, but it's got a softness to it. And this is kind of a classic album cover. I believe it's David Stone Martin, it is. And I've seen this cover in a few jazz books when I was a much younger collector. And believe it or not, it took me a long time to actually track this record down. Verve from this era usually aren't too tough to come by. And I'm sure I passed it up a few times as to the fact that it doesn't really have a lead artist build on it. So even though I was collecting Stan Getz a long time ago, I think I passed over his early Verve material for a long time without knowing what I was doing. I used to be young and dumb. Passed up a lot of great records over the years. And I wish that there was a time I could go back in time. And my first choice would be go to 52, 54 on 52nd Street and just see the electricity of what was happening there. And all the different nightclubs and the neon and the streets glowing at night. The buzz of the music coming out of every venue. I can't remember the number, but there was like 13, 14 clubs within a few blocks on East 52nd Street. And nowadays, my friend Ken McCullough says he goes there once in a while, and there's just a plaque honoring the memory of it, but there's no signs of any of that. And of course, New York regenerates itself so quickly. Buildings often don't live to be 60, 70 years old before there's a better use for that real estate, a more intensified use, and something bigger, taller goes up. And so we've lost most of that real history there. But if I had a second choice of where I could go back to, it'd be going back to being a record collector in 1996, 1997. This was the real dry point for vinyl imprints, especially here in America. There was still some stuff being printed in Europe. I used to remember seeing stuff making it over just as an import, from Holland, from England, from France. But you don't see a lot of American press vinyl from 92, 93, 94, up into probably the late 90s. And hip-hop and R&B was the exception, especially the 12 inches. Those were still being put out. Full-length albums, not so much. But there was a lot of stuff that you just couldn't find on vinyl. And I was collecting vinyl at that point, but I was collecting classic rock. The Dead, the Stones, the Beatles, the Who, learning all that history. And I was slowly being pushed back towards jazz and Ray Charles and Louis Jordan, but I hadn't quite got there yet. And as the late 90s approach, I'd learned enough to know that Miles Davis and John Coltrane and those guys were important, but I hadn't really grasped the scope of jazz in any way or understood the importance of so much of the other founding fathers of this music. And in mid-90s, most people were discarding their records like trash. They would drop them off at pawn shops. Sometimes they wouldn't even get money for them. They would just still leave them at the pawn shop. And record stores were getting boxes and boxes and boxes of used vinyl. And I remember when my first CD collection got stolen back in 92, they axed our back door down and they swiped out like 3-4 shelves of our CD collection from our house. And those were CDs that were 25, 30 bucks a piece back in those days. I was pretty devastated. And what led me to buy vinyl was going to the record store looking for my stolen CDs because I had my name in them. And in part because we had roommates with the same CDs. And none of my CDs were there. And I walked to the back of the shop. There was a lot of those same records by Pink Floyd, by Led Zeppelin, Simon & Garfunkel on vinyl. And my stereo that I was renting to own at the time had a turntable on top. So I bought the first 5 Simon & Garfunkel records on vinyl that day, which is the first 5 records I bought of this collection. I did have some vinyl back in the 80s as a kid, but that's a different era, different collection. And I wish I had the hindsight now, Because when I was buying those Simon Garfunkel records and looking at the Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, there was 5 or 6 copies of The Wall, 7 copies of The Animals. All these different records had multiple copies in there for $2, $3, $4. Everyone was dumping their vinyl like it was nothing. And I remember seeing a lot of great jazz titles that I didn't even know what they were. But since I've looked for them in the last 30 years, I'm like, oh, I used to see that all the time. And so if I could go somewhere else in time, in the time machine, I'd love to go back to 96, 97, 98, and there somewhere, and go through the great Minneapolis and Chicago record stores and just find all that great jazz music that was still really affordable. Original pressings, you know, various conditions. You just had a lot to pick from, and I just overlooked all of it at those times. Didn't know any better. And of course, at that same time, the Japanese were coming across, and they were buying records from the great record stores by the pallet. And I've been told these stories by numerous record store owners. They would say how these Japanese sellers would come in and they would literally buy boxes and boxes of American titles of vinyl and brought them back and shipped them over to Japan. And jazz was one of the things they really were buying up. Blue Note especially, but pretty much all jazz titles were being swept up and brought over to Japan. And the Japanese, there's still a great glut of American vinyl over there. But again, it should be one of those fun things. We could go back and go, man, if I knew what I knew now, then the things I could have found for next to nothing. And I can think of a lot of cool jazz records. I remember seeing them on end caps. Then they sat there for a long time, and now I go, man, that's a great record. If I'd have known that a Urania Coleman Hawkins record was this good, I would have bought that years ago for the $6 that they wanted for it, and now that record goes for $100. You know, it's one of those things. So if I could have the gross to Christmas pass take me somewhere, I'd love to go back to those record stores knowing what I know now. And of course, I managed to collect most of it now anyway. And a lot of the deeper stuff still isn't that expensive. You know, it's the real name artists that are fetching big bucks. But even a guy like Haig Mobley's records didn't start going for thousands of dollars until more recent vintage. So this great Stan Getz record, though, it's part of Getz's development, because he's playing pretty much bebop back in his earlier sides at Roost, playing hard and aggressive with a real sharp tone, and then he kind of mellows on, does this kind of West Coast cool thing at times, and then of course he gets into the more modern compositional stuff, Mulligan kind of stuff in the 60s, and then of course Bossa Nova hits, and Mulligan Getz has a whole nother career via that vehicle. And then Getz comes back to making more modern stuff again after that. I'm a big Stan Getz guy. Not a pleasant human being from many sources. He was kind of one of those snappy McGees, you know, who wasn't always fun to sit and have a chat with. But anyway, it's a great David Stone Martin cover. A great West Coast cool bop group. And these guys all so interchange with each other. And Getz is kind of a bit of the anomaly here, but guys like Mann and Vinegar, Condoli and Lou Levy, these guys are all playing in various constructs out of the Woody Herman groups, out of the Stan Kenton groups, and it's a pretty fluent group of musicians who will all play on each other's stuff. And this is one of the things I probably should have got this years ago. I got it about 1.5 years ago probably, and now it's become fairly tough to come by. But anyway, fun record and an enjoyable piece of music, no question about it. So I hope you all enjoyed that Blakey episode I made before the holiday. It's a great session. You should definitely try to pick that up. It's definitely worth having. And the last thing I want to mention is I've had a few people comment to me, am I anti-hi-fi? And that's not what I'm trying to be. If you want to be a hi-fi person, that's fine. It's just, the hi-fi people are often very condemning of the non-hi-fi crowd, condescending. I hear it all the time on the Facebook groups especially. Oh, you bought that pressing, oh my God, you don't know what you're doing kind of attitude. And I think they drive a lot of jazz people away who are curious But the pomposity and the you don't know nothing attitude of some of the hi-fi people, and of course, as I've said many times, a lot of the hi-fi people seem to talk more about listen to how my speakers sound versus listen to what Stan Getz is telling me through that horn. You know, there's a great disconnect, and they can sit there talking about their system for 20 minutes and never talk about the music they're playing. And that's never really, I find it boring myself. And I think a lot of other people do. Because I get a lot of comments on this channel about how it's nice that I'm talking about the music and not just, you know, pressings and gear. And there's plenty of channels for that. But I don't want to come off as condescending in any way of people who are hi-fis. I have a lot of good friends, dear friends, who are very much into high fidelity and collecting, you know, the $10,000 tube amps and the whole spiel. Which has never been my focus. You know, my focus is on buying more records. I still have a lot of records I want to buy. I'm not going to start worrying about, you know, I got a system I can hear the music just fine. And I would reckon I hear things on my system that you would deem inferior, that y'all don't have the time to hear because you're not really listening the same way I'm listening. That's kind of where I'm coming from with that. But by all means, it is wonderful to hear a great sound system play a great record. There's nothing better. You know, it's a great thing if you have that time and that money and that's what you want to focus your time on. I find a lot of times the hi-fi people and a large collection aren't synonymous. You know, they'll have maybe a couple hundred records and all their money goes into their systems and their wires and their speakers. And a lot of times the people who are collectors are less into that aspect, but there's obviously exceptions. Shigeru Suzuki in Japan, who was a jazz musician himself, I didn't find out until much later, but he's a friend of mine. We chat sometimes. We used to chat more back in the day. He's got an incredible hi-fi system and an incredible jazz collection. You know, so there's certainly both elements can be done, but I don't have the money for both. And I'm going to say this, if I had more unlimited resources, I would upgrade my sound system for sure. But this PA system I'm playing through, I got a PA system in the back, plus the one I do for my DJ gigs, 3 little sound systems, they all sound good. Plus I have my mixer here, which I can tweak my highs, mids, and lows, and there's EQs on the mixer, there's EQs on the amps. So, but even myself, people often who are hi-fi ask me, what do you play through? And I'll tell them, and they'll be kind of indignant and be like, oh. You know, I've had people just, not even respond to me once I told them how I listen to my record. It's like, wow, we didn't even get to talk about the music. You found out I didn't have a hi-fi, and suddenly I'm not even worth having a conversation with anymore. And I've been kind of put off by that. You know, I'm like, really? Because I don't have $10,000 speakers, we can't talk about music? And that's happened more than once. That's happened plenty of times. So my indignance and my viewpoint of them has often been shaded by how they've spoken with me even. And then me, of course, being a DJ and having my own, don't care really what they think. When I see it in the Facebook groups especially, and I see the kind of the rude condescension that some of these guys will throw out there, I just feel like I got to be a defender of the little guy sometimes. And be like, if you love the music, I don't care what you listen to it on. Grab an old cassette and listen to it on a Walkman and walk around the park. You can still hear Charlie Parker. You know, it's the old Tom Sawyer thing I've said a million times. You can read it on paperback and glean as much information in the story as some guy reading a leather-bound original pressing. It's not about the format you're listening to it on. It's about the music and what it says to you. And if it moves you. And can you hear more? I don't know. I've sat and compared different pressings of records before, and I find the changes to be very imperceptible. And again, I don't have a high-end system. But what's the point of having a high-end system if it's just there to reveal the deficiencies of some of your records? It's like, it just seems like counterproductive. Go buy 5 more records instead. Anyway, it's not meant to ever be critical or like that's stupid. Because it's not. There's a good reason to have a nice sound system. It just seems like it needs balance. So anyway, I hope you all have a great. Hope you all had a great Christmas. You know, Merry Christmas to everybody. I meant to do an episode beforehand, but my mother-in-law was here, and you know how those things go. It just gets to be a house full real quickly. And I got a gig coming up on New Year's Eve, which will help. This is nice, you know. And there's a chance I have a few gigs now, places I'm talking to about doing a gig coming up on a regular basis. So hopefully one of those things will come into fruition, because I definitely could use a little bit more steady revenue stream than these gigs here and there. So be blessed, everybody. I'll talk to you again before the New Year's. I'll just do at least one more episode this week. But again, cheers everyone, happy holidays. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.